Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, greeting from Walesango University in Semarang in Indonesia, where I am working with my colleagues here, an international project. For my colleagues here in Indonesia, it is a new experience to participate in a conference in Israel through a University of Indonesia, because Indonesia has still not recognized Israel. I hope my colleagues will enjoy this conference too. Today, our second session for Islam and evolution. So we have three speakers from field of Islamic education and philosophy, or one speaker, two responses, each 15 minutes. I will introduce them individually before their presentation, but I would like to start with our first speaker. First speaker will be Nigmeh, who will inform us about her research results. She has conducted interviews with teachers and school children for her research. Here she will inform us about her findings. We are very excited about your presentation, Nigmeh. But I give you some information about Nigmeh, about Toameh Kadan. She is a PhD student at the Department of Learning and Instructional Sciences at the Faculty of Education, University of Haifa. Her research focuses on the acceptance of evolution in Israeli Muslim society and is under the supervision of Professor Hanan Alexander. Nigmeh has a BA in Natural Sciences and MA in Biological Thought, both of the Open University in Israel. She was instructor of the Open University's instruction to academia, courses for high school students on evolution, and experience that triggered her current research. Nigmeh, now the stage is yours. You know your time, but I will give attention to. Please start with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adnan. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
My topic is Muslim students and religious education experts. Made questionnaire. Excuse me?
Speak up.
Okay. Made questionnaires, semi-structured interviews, and Delphi study. Firstly, I'm happy to be here with you today and share some of the research findings that have accumulated so far. Thank you all very much for devoting some of your precious time to listening and responding to my presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and insights. I'm sure I will learn a lot from it. And now for a background. A brief background from the Muslim world around us. From a study, Salman Hamid's study from 1908 showed that Hamid shows in his study about the acceptance of evolution in 6 Muslim countries that sorry. In his student, he shows that in Turkey, Egypt, Malaysia, and Pakistan, and Indonesia, they agree with the claim that evolution cannot be true. Only in Kazakhstan, about 30% of the participants shows. Just a minute, please. Thank you. Sorry. Okay.
If there's a problem reading the screen, one of us can move the slides while you're reading from your thing.
I think it's okay now. That there is about 40% of study just in Kazakhstan. About 40% of the study participants agreed that evolution was true. And from and from evolution education in the Arab states, context, history, stakeholders, position, and future prospects. For the research of Wujud shows, and he concluded that evolution education in the Arab states is in a crisis, as evidenced by the fact that a relatively high percentage of students at the high school and university levels are not supportive of the theory of evolution. And about teaching evolution. Yes, I teach it, said Maha Sami, a middle school biology teacher who's worked at both public and private schools. But I tell my students not to believe it, at least not when it comes to humans. Another example, of course, evolution is taught here, said one of the department's professors who asked that his name not to be used. There is no problem with that, but we don't cover human evolution. That's different. The students wouldn't have that. No, evolution is concerned only with animals. This is from Cairo University. We see here from these two examples how it was important how we see how important it is to examine the issue in depth and dwell on the small details in order to understand the full and correct picture. And here from Israel, from 2016, as it's the same slide which Rachel shows at her great lecture this morning, we see that the survey shows that there is a gap in the acceptance of evolution between Jews and Arabs. Only 38% of the Muslim agrees that human and other living beings evolved over the years, compared to 53% of the Jews who agree with that, a finding that we also see in our research. And now to our research, to my research here, to my part. I have 255 made questionnaire participants, students and teachers, 219 Muslim high school students, 35 high school teachers, and in 8 in-depth interviews, 3 education policy experts, 5 religious experts, 10 Delphi participants, 2 rounds, 7 education policy experts, 3 religious experts. The first methodological tool is in our study is the MATE questionnaire, the measure of acceptance of the theory of evolution. I didn't find a previous translation of the MATE in Arabic. It was administered in Arab countries in English or French. From what I found, but we felt it would be much more appropriate and understandable for students who learn here in Arabic to answer the questionnaires in Arabic. So I worked on the translation that was reviewed by other experts, like with the Hebrew. We also made the same parallel adaptations, adding in my view to the beginning of the statements and adding questions on the relationship between science and religion. I have also 219 participants, high school students from Central, Haifa, and Northern District, the areas with the highest Muslim population, from 10th to 12th grades, boys and girls. As Masha mentioned yesterday, the average acceptance of evolution among Muslim students was found to be lower than that among secular and religious Jewish students. Whereas the factor average students' positive use of evolution was found to be lower than the average of the other 2 sectors or the other 2 streams, as you called it before. The cons average factor, the students' negative use of evolution, is higher among the Muslim students than the students from the 2 other Jewish streams, which means that there is more resistance to the theory of evolution among the students, among the Muslim students here. We also left space for comments below every question in the questionnaire. And students added comments that echoed their quantitative responses. We see that we see the negative presentations of Darwinian evolution students' comments, like Darwin's theory is scientifically incorrect because it divides man into categories and ranks, and that is racism. I can accept evolution, but not Darwin's theory. Scientifically stupid theory. Scientists refute this theory. God is the creator of the world, and there is no other besides him. This theory is the reason for all the wars. And a theory is possible, but it takes a long time. Do not believe in the theory of evolution. Use believe, the term believe. There are things that that are beyond our abilities, beyond human thinking abilities. We see that Muslim students relative to Jewish students from both streams are less likely to agree that evolution and religion answer two types of questions.
I think the far left, you want the Jewish students, there's the secular stream, the one in the middle is the religious stream, and the Muslim students, I think that's just a little, because it was on the slide before, and that would parallel what Marcia had.
No, it's less.
It's statement number 22.
Yeah.
There is two statements. Yeah. You mean this one?
No, I'm just looking at the bottom.
This?
You have Jewish religious students twice.
Okay.
Religious
it's secular.
Twice.
Yeah.
I think the far left is
secular.
Yes. Thank you.
It's a typo.
Yes.
We cannot understand very well what you say.
On the slide, there's a printing mistake. The middle category are Jewish students' religious stream. The far left category facing the screen should say secular stream, and the far right is correct saying Muslim students.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
That parallels what we saw yesterday, Masha's data from the other base.
Yes. And in addition, Muslim students also show, and now it's okay. No,
never mind.
Okay, I'm sorry. You understand?
Yeah. Okay. We can now read it now.
Okay. Muslim students also show much less agreement than Jewish students from both streams that religion and science touch on two different ways of reasoning. Comments from students also reinforce these findings that students tend towards an approach that blends science with religion rather than separate them. And I quote, "Science should encourage religion and not distance itself from religion. In the Quran, there is an answer for every question." Despite the negative perceptions of the theory among many students, there have been some interesting and encouraging comments regarding the desire to know about the theory. The following are some of the comments made by students as well at some schools. This is a very interesting topic, and I think if the school wants to start teaching evolution, it should be combined with the verses from the Quran, so as not to raise doubts and increase the credibility of this theory. Who was the first to discover it? What is the scientific basis for the theory? Moreover, where did it come from? I want to know, but do not want you to force me to accept it. Why people believe in the theory out of a deep conviction, how man evolved. And now I will present the data from my methodological research tool, the semi-structured interviews. And I said before, there were 8 in-depth interviews, 3 education experts or education policy experts, and 5 religious experts. Religious experts, I mean in teaching of Islam and on diverse issues in the religion of the Islam, in the region of Islam. As has been described earlier, and this is the same table or the scale we used as a team, as has been described in the analysis of the interviews was done as a team of all the researchers in the project in order to frame the response of the interviewees so that we can compare them and we can draw conclusions about our future work plan in the schools. We summarized the views on presenting the evolution-religion interface to students found in interviews in the following table. It's divided into 4 quadrants along the categorizations of conceptual, pedagogical, and avoidance engagement. In terms of results from Muslim religious education experts, I found 3 interviewees who said we should avoid teaching Muslim students about evolution and religion in classrooms for a variety of reasons. Like, for example, conceptually, they offered the explanation that those are 2 different disciplines, and they say also that there is a challenge. This issue challenge religion. Evolution is just theory and it's not science, and our society is not ready yet for dealing with such controversial issue. And pedagogically, they brought up explanations such as consideration of diversity and that there is a need to prepare a work plan and that it is only suited to be addressed initially in a non-formal education. More interviewees agree that there should be an engagement with the evolution-religion interface. Again, for varied and sometimes contradictory reasons. That it was important to explain that evolution is an example of an unscientific theory and a secular ideology that is not compatible with religion, with Islam. Others felt differently and stated that there is no verse in the Quran that disproves the theory, breaking down the assumption that there is a conflict between evolution and belief. The problem was brought from the West. Islam has no problem with evolution, they said. Conceptually, they stated that there should be explanations of the natures of the disciplines, that there is also an educational significance, that this topic enhance and develop critical thinking. Others suggest teaching about historical aspects of positive Muslim approaches to evolutionary perspectives. For example, Ibn Khaldun, who wrote about this during the Islam Golden Age. Pedagogically, many experts put the emphasis on the prevention of breach of faith, strengthening the belief. Some did this by breaking down the assumption that there is a conflict, while others emphasized the conflict. Some stated it would be good to stimulate discussion between religion and evolution as a false and incompatible theory or dealing with the conflict. And educational importance, they said, experts felt that this subject can assist in expanding horizons and leads to dealing with the essence of the field, science or faith, tool for teachers, and as for tools for teachers, they emphasize the need to provide tools for teachers, content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge to be assisted by religious experts. And among the experts, it has been argued that there is an urgent need to intensify the philosophical discussions concerning the questions of the essence of science and the essence of faith and religion in order to prepare the appropriate intellectual background for the preparation of educational program unique to our society. And among the policymakers, it can be noted the argument that once controversial issues of this kind are raised, it is important to simultaneously protect and deepen religious belief. And as to the interview summary, I can say that when asked in the interviews, policymakers and experts expressed agreement that including the discussion regarding religion and evolution in schools as a built-in part of the curriculum would be positive, as long as it was optional for schools to choose to enter this discussion, and the discourse must be adapted to the culture from which the students come and to the abilities and willingness of the teachers themselves. It is implied that policymakers are willing to put this discourse into the classrooms, provided it doesn't undermine religious belief. And there is a sense in number of interviews that there is an intention to introduce this discourse with the intention of exposing students to the subject of evolution in order to prove to them that it is an unfounded theory. All policymakers and experts confirmed that the issue of discourse between religion and science, especially on the issue of evolution is, and the emphasis of the conflict between the two, doesn't come up in school classrooms. There are those who say that the students themselves do not raise such questions. They study only for the purpose of passing the tests and are not interested in conflicting meanings and interpretations. Others think that the teachers themselves didn't want to get into such discussions for religious or scientific reasons, for of conflict with religion or lack of scientific knowledge. In addition, this discussion was not part of the curriculum in the curricula, neither in biology nor in religion. The issue of human evolution is problematic and continues to be an obstacle in the debate of this issue. Few agree that that a way can be found to reconcile this issue with religion. The majority continue to believe that man is the crown of the creation and thus fundamentally different from the minister of living being, and it is difficult to connect him to other living beings. And as for the Delphi survey, round one, there was, as they said before, three open questions. In the first one, in teaching the religion of Islam, should the interface of religion and scientific perspective be discussed? Second question, which conflict between science and religion regarding origins of the universe and humanity should be presented when evolution is taught? And the third question, should evolution be addressed in religious education? If so, in what way? Okay, for the first question, there were 9 who said yes. The majority agree that scientific issues should be brought up for discussion in religious classes for a variety of reasons. On the one hand, there are those who argue that the discussion is important and it is worthwhile to expose students to controversial issues and critical thinking. And on the other hand, those who think all science is in the Quran, al-i'jaz al-ilmi, what we call. Only one expert thinks that it's not the burning issue, and we should deal with we should deal with other questions.
So the no should be one?
Sorry, one. It's one. Another type. Okay. Which conflicts? The second question. Almost equal division between those who do not see conflict do not see conflict, and those who can point to controversial issues. 5 find it difficult to accept that there is a conflict or conflict at all between religion and science. If science is proven, there is no reason for it to conflict with religion, with Islam. And for others, think that conflicting issues like the origin of man and the universe and life should be discussed. We see that among experts and Muslim students, there are those who do not see any conflict between Islam and evolution. Waghid, from the article I showed before, I quoted before, found in also that among many Lebanese Muslim students and Egyptians, they do not see the conflict. Either they do not see the conflict, also they do not see the conflict, and I quote, their positions regarding evolution, however, suggest otherwise, especially that many of them accept religious rather than scientific explanations for the diversity of life on Earth. One possible explanation is that these students do not have sufficient knowledge and understanding of evolution or of science in general to allow them to take an ambiguous position regarding this issue. Additionally, most Sunni and Shia students seemed unaware of the wide spectrum of religious interpretations existing among Muslims in relation to the origin and evolution of life.
Nigmeh, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll go fast. And the third question was, should evolution be addressed? And 9 said, no problem discussing evolution. Also for variety of reasons. 1 said we should not evolution and therefore cannot give answer about because we don't understand, we should not deal with it. And here are some charts. I will not stay for long at these slides because I think it's clear that we should. This is the survey round 2. From part 1, we can see that 7 interviewees agree and even strongly agree that it is important to discuss scientific issues in the classroom. As for the question of or the state that evolution cannot be discussed unless it is scientifically proven, there were a variety of respondents. What are the important topics? It's not a threat to religion. There is no consensus? Yes. Okay. Study the reality of the creation of the world as stated in the Holy Quran, there is a consensus. And also here we see a clear consensus of how to act. To the question how to act, we have a agreement. They all say that it must emphasize that God is the creator of all the things in order to open the door for discussion between religion and scientific discourse. Teachers, training colleagues must provide programs for teachers to do this. And the summary, it seems like there is a negative perspective. We see, I'll go faster because I have no time. Open questions, interpretations of the Quran. Is it, interpretation in Arabic, and Adnan and Ayman and Yusef will agree with me. There is tafsir and ta'wil. Those are 2 different things, and they may further tell us about it more. Who has the authority to decide what is right? What is the right story? What is meant by the term science, scientific? It was mentioned before, and it will be, I think, later. What we mean by critical thinking, and what is the place of historical perspective here. Okay, the last slide, the slide that I did this for this slide. All these lectures for this. You see here Rachel, our own Rachel, and Rana Dajani, Professor Rana from Jordan. Both are religious and accepting at the same time the evolution, and even Rana is teaching, Rachel is researching and want to promote accepting evolution in the religious society. And I can say about it that Hamid said it has extensively researched the relationship between evolution and Islam. And he said he believes equating the theory with atheism is completely wrong. I agree with him. His research suggests that many Muslims around the world have no problem accepting evolution if this connection was eliminated. I don't agree with that. Hamid, this is, I don't think it's a miraculous solution to the great opposition to evolution, but I do agree that this issue of the connection between evolution and atheism is indeed important and significant, at least to the beginning of the discussion, and especially when it's led by women. The explanation for opposition to evolution in Muslim society cannot be completely reduced to the religious factor, and we must continue to deepen our research on this issue in order to uncover all the components related to resistance that intensified towards the beginning of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigmeh, for this really very interesting presentation and your results.
Thank you.
I think it will be a really very interesting discussion about your results. But first sponsor now is Ayman Agbaria. He's a Palestinian researcher, poet, playwright, social activist. He serves as senior lecturer in the Department of Leadership and Policy in Education at the same University of Haifa. He works for the Mandel School for Education Leadership as a faculty member. Agbaria also has published tens of scientific articles, chapters in academic journal. Ayman is an influential, public intellectual. He has appeared in tens of TV and radio shows, talks. In 2016, he served as visiting scholar at the Center for Research and Evolution, Muslim Education at the University College Institute of Education in London, at the University for Islamic Studies at the University of Vienna. As for his literary work, Dr. Agbaria's poems has been published in many anthologies in various languages. 5 of his plays have been produced. Thank you, Ayman, for your participation. Now, really, we are waiting for your response for the presentation of Nigmeh. Please, the
Thank you, Adnan.
yours.
Thank you, Adnan, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Nigmeh, for your thought-provoking presentation. It's really very interesting and bringing a new voice and a new way of looking at how at the religious education in Arab education, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole dissertation, inshallah, very, very soon.
Ayman, addition, you have 15 minutes. You know it.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I hope that my observations, comments are coherent. You know, I'm not sure whether these my comments are coherent, because we just had the slides and the presentation, and now Nigmeh's presentation. So I'll try to resonate with some of the findings and the presentation. My first observation goes to the idea that the findings actually echoes the debate like the debate in the Arab world or in the Arab thought and in the Muslim thought about the evolution from the very end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century about Darwin's theory. I mean, from the very beginning, Muslim intellectuals were aware about this theory, and there were three camps. You know, there was the camp led by Shibli Ishmael, you know, and who was, you know, actually a Christian intellectual, you know, looking at the evolution theory and saying, you know, it's advocating to embrace the theory. On the other hand, there were Afghani and Muslim thinkers, you know, opposing the idea, and in the middle. And this was a very interesting position of people like Ismail Madhar, you know, Ismail Madhar, who was born in 1891 and died in 1963, you know, trying to a kind of a way like to accommodate the ideas of evolution into Islam. Trying to accommodate, subsume, you know, trying to modify it to see how it fits within Islam. So actually, the findings resonates and echoes these big camps within the intellectual tradition in Egypt and in Syria and in our region. And the interest in this, in the evolution theory, because it was never perceived as a theory. It was from the very beginning perceived as an ideology. As an ideology that affects perceptions of government, of politics, of man's nature, of society, and how, I mean, under colonialism that time, you know, the East or this part of the world should find its notion of progress. How we should now find our notion of progress, should we imitate the Europe and the Western countries? Should we go back to Islam? Should we find a third way? So in a way, from the very beginning, the evolution theory was never perceived as a theory, and it's not perceived as a theory. Actually, maybe a kind of a criticism to the research that, you know, it seems as introduced to the students and the participants as if it's a fact, or as if it is and it's less, there's a less engagement with it as a theory, because there are a lot of evolution theories. There's no one unified, you know, one theory of evolution, and there is less engagement with the ideological aspects of this theory and its ramification on perceptions of of perceptions of society, of progress, democracy. So this is one idea that I want to share with you. The second idea, very related, it goes about this type of research which asks whether democracy is compatible with Islam, whether evolution is compatible with Islam, whether human rights are compatible with Islam. In a way, this, you know, this kind of studies actually undermine, in a way, agency. It is less concerned about the Muslims or students and teachers as producing, reworking, you know, inventing their own way of thinking about evolution. And this is what we need to conceptualize and theorize. Now, we can go and ask, like from a top-down perspective, saying now this is evolution and what is your attitudes to it, and it's okay. I mean, this could be very interesting, and this is what we are doing in this study. But I think another venue that merits exploring is how they actually rework it at the classroom. How Muslims conceptualize evolution, how they rework it, how they teach it. What components of this theory are being brought into classroom, what components are, maybe overlooked or marginalized. So I'm more into less exploring attitudes about, theories of evolution, and I would be more interested in hearing more about the praxis of engaging with this theory at the classroom level. Now, the findings also, and this is my third point, really exemplify that many policymakers, many students, many teachers are really disconnected from two strands of thoughts. On the one hand, they are disconnected. They seem as less knowledgeable about how Muslim thinkers, thought about evolution, and even components of evolution, like the idea of selection, the idea of competition, the idea of natural selection, the idea of survival, the idea of, self-breeding, the idea of, how generations develop. From al-Jahid in al-Haywan, the animal, and his engagement with these ideas. And Ibn Khaldun, I think Nigmeh was insightfully mentioned Ibn Khaldun. This is good. And this is, again, exemplified to what extent the teachers and people who are engaged in this field are alienated from this thought, classical thought, but also from modern thought. If you look now at the way Muhammad Shahrur, for example, or Abdul Sabur Shaheen, and many others, conceptualize these ideas and try to resonate it into Islamic thought, you would find really huge steps, a huge that goes beyond the idea or the dichotomy that, whether we accept it or reject it, because right now we are still with the same dichotomy, like science versus religion, and West versus, the Orient versus the Occident, and I think the modern thought, modern Islamic thought, have gone beyond these dichotomies, trying to show that, there is a way to think about evolution in a very innovative ways, and ways that would actually bring us back to the idea that you look at these issues from a deliberative way, not from a normative way. It's less from the top down, from the bottom up. In the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قل سيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق. We are asked all the time to go and and observe and deliberate on how creation began. This is something that I'm now talking from a point of a believer. We are asked to deliberate, to think about how creation began, and you know, and we are even I remember this ayah from Al-An'am where he says, you know, ويستخلف من بعدكم ما يشاء كما أنشأكم من ذرية قوم آخرين. You know, if he wills, he can do away with you and give succession after you for whomever he wills, just as he produced you from the descendants of another people. So, you know, the descendants of another people, you know, the idea that we are kind of aware, kind in a chain of a creation. So I think Muslim thought have gone beyond this dichotomy, which, you know, again, poses religion versus science. Again, I want to thank Nigmeh for her wonderful presentation. I think there's much to say about, you know, the intellectual traditions that feeds the responses of the teachers. I think the more she will ground her findings within these traditions, you know, intellectual traditions, the more the research would be more rich and more substantiated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayman, for your response. We will discuss about it. What did you say? But now, second responder, Yusef Waghid, is leading African philosopher of education, holds 3 doctorates in education policy and philosophy from University of the Western Cape, Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Yusef Waghid is now professor of philosophy of education at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa. He is author of Education Crisis of Philosophy, published Routledge. Yusef, now you have the word, please. We are really waiting for your interesting response. Please.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Adnan. And thank you to Nigmeh for her very informative presentation. And of course, also her supervisor, Professor Hanan Alexander. I want to raise 3 issues which Nigmeh so pertinently accentuated in her presentation. But I think any discussion or examination of the concept of evolution in relation to education cannot be divorced from understandings of interpretation, what I call the pseudo dichotomy between science and religion, and of course, the mismatch as it is presented between education and evolution. So let me start off with the last claim she made between tafsir and ta'wil. The research shows that there is an urgency to understand tafsir and ta'wil as interpretation and a deeper reflection about things in the world. There's an urgency to have both interpretation, which is tafsir, and a deeper reflection about things in the world. And I agree with Nigmeh and the findings that if these 2 processes of human thought are not going to be pursued in an integrated way, we might not have a plausible argument to proffer. So I'm talking about, in this case, a plausible argument, maybe in defense or not of evolution in Islam. So I think she's right to point us to merely literally interpreting the Quran as a text, and of course, reflecting deeper about its meanings. Now, that brings me to the claim, of course, as pointed out by the respondents, the Quran is not a book of science. It's not a text about science. It's Hudal Linnas, it's a book of guidance for humanities. And that's, for me, the emphasis of what the Quran stands for. So if it's a book of guidance, it implies that there are principles that the Quran espouses, according to which interpretations and deeper reflections about the Quran should be made. And my understanding of the Quran as a book of guidance means that there are guiding frameworks according to which the Quran guides humans who reflect about its messages. And when humans reflect about messages in the Quran, they do it in terms of the framework the Quran espoused. So when one reads the Quran, there are numerous verses in the Quran that point towards creation, the universe, the earth, the messages pertaining to its creation, and how the universe and earth and humans evolved. And that to me suggests that the Quran provides guidance as to how its divine messages ought to be interpreted. And the understanding I get is from a simple a simple word in Arabic, which the Quran uses very intensely. The Quran says, thumma this, thumma that, thumma that. So the very idea of thumma points towards things that do not occur haphazardly, disorderly, chaotically, but that things happen coherently in a specific order, taqdeer, in a particular fashion, in a particular mold. And that suggests to me, it points to the idea of evolution. So any understanding that the Quran is averse to the idea of evolution does not make sense. If the Quran were to be averse to the idea of evolution, it would not have mentioned the word thumma so many times. It is replete with the word thumma, which points towards evolution. So, but that particular understanding of the Quran can only happen if there's a willingness to reflect deeper about the concepts espoused. So that would be my first remark. So I actually agree that there has to be more interpretation and more deeper reflection, which is, as Nigmeh pointed out, ta'wil. The second aspect which I infer from a presentation is the old, unnecessary, I would even call it somewhat archaic dichotomy that is created between science and religion. As if science do not have a human element, and as if religion does not have any kind of scientific orientation or inclination. But that, of course, requires one to further examine what scientific statements are. To me, a scientific statement would be what one proffers you can justify. And if religion is also about human thought and practice and human experience and what people do and the justifications they proffer for their acts, that would be religious. But with the understanding that what you do is not necessarily out of tune with your sense of reason, your sense of being, and your sense of spiritual growth or advancement. So there's an interrelationship between what one can call reason, cognition, and spirituality. And for me, that human experience is a religious experience. And if you can justify that, that would be an act of science. So I think when one creates this dichotomy between science and religion, and this is also where I want to bring in what I would call a misunderstanding between revealed ulumul naqliya and ulumul aqliya, revealed and non-revealed knowledges, because a Muslim would, I would imagine a Muslim would recognize the omnipotence of Allah Almighty. So Allah would be present, God would be present in everything he or she does. And that means that even the way she conducts herself as a Muslim would be influenced by her consciousness about Allah or God. So in that sense, her writings, her readings, her understandings would be, her interpretations would be informed by a sense of God. So that would usually be equated with non-revealed knowledge. But non-revealed knowledge can only be non-revealed if God is not present. So if one believes that God is omnipresent, then even in the ordinary writings that you pursue, God is there, which means that even in the non-revealed, God's presence, Allah's presence is there. And obviously I understand that the revealed or the revealed sciences mostly through the ages have been referred to as the Quran, Ahadith or Sunnah, and then of course the Sharia and Fiqh and Tasawwuf. These sciences are often couched as revealed, but even in those revealed texts, there's always been an element of human interpretation. So although they have been revealed, human interpretation and human understanding have made sense of what was revealed to humanity. So what I am saying, I think there's an opportunity nowadays to rethink this dichotomy between revealed and non-revealed, and that we do not unnecessarily categorize knowledge as this is from Allah revealed, this is pure, this is absolute, this is monolithic, because it is not like that. It's interpreted. Even Quran is interpreted. Otherwise, how would humans make sense of the Quran? And what is non-revealed, if one has the understanding that all knowledge comes from Allah, surely it's very difficult to hang on to the idea that there can be a form of non-revealed knowledge. So if Allah's presence is everywhere, then it leads us to begin to question whether the dichotomy between what is revealed and non-revealed is really helpful in making sense of concepts, which is often controversial concepts like evolution. So I think what the research shows is that there is an opportunity to start to rethink this notion. I think scholars like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd tried to do that in a way, and they categorize sciences. But I'm asking for something more. I'm suggesting that maybe there is no such thing as non-revealed at all. If one considers oneself to be a believer and upholding a particular faith and believing that you come from God, so you have to have some connection with knowledge that comes from God. So I think
if you have 4 minutes, three minutes.
And I'll make my last point. So what the research suggests is that the way I interpret it, if we do not begin to rethink this, what I would call pseudo dichotomy between revealed and non-revealed, we would not make sense, better sense of evolution and its understandings. And then my last point is on the matter of education. At the heart of this notion of evolution is the idea of education. And if education is being taught as something which suggests that we have to comply, then you're not going to be open to any concept that's seemingly controversial. But if education were to initiate people, humans, into understandings of openness and flexibility, which is where I move towards, because I cannot imagine that humans are already complete and that they will ever reach a stage of completeness. So what I'm arguing for is to begin to look at education without ends. Because if there's an education without ends, there's always room for education to evolve itself, and a new potentiality might arise by itself. And that to me is at the heart of controversial issues which have been made controversial, like evolution. So I think the idea of education is important here, because we educate students, and that means we engage with them. How do we engage with them? Not only through indoctrination, as what happens in many Muslim-dominated countries, but through openness, through flexibility, through an acceptance that there are other ways of seeing things in the world. And if that kind of understanding of education can be valued, we might become more open to these controversial issues like evolution in particular. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yusef, for your really very interesting response. Thank you, Nigmeh, for your presentation. And Ayman, thank you so much for your response. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, now is the time. We have 25 minutes for your question and comments. You can chat with us in the chat room, or just raise your hands and press on the sign of hand on Zoom and talk. Now is the time for your question. Please.
So I'll start.
But on audience question, I would suggest that they just come to forward, ask their question, because I don't see them. Only I need Tali and Nigmeh, not more.
Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, I see you, Mash.
Okay, nice to see you. Yeah, so in a way, this is a question on Nigmeh's behalf, or on behalf of the study, because what Nigmeh reported on was part of a much larger study that included also Jewish students. And in a way, it's addressed both to Ayman and to Yusef, although each of them offered a slightly different kind of analysis. But Nigmeh reported on a perceived dichotomy that was, she didn't invent the dichotomy. She didn't come and impose the dichotomy, I don't think. We can talk about that. She began by describing data, not about these Muslim students in Israel, but about the history of this topic for some period of time and the perceived dichotomy between them. And then basically pointed out that there's a fairly large population that continues with this dualistic approach to the topic, or their dichotomous approach to the topic. So that she was, as it were, reporting kind of empirical data about that perception. Each of you challenged whether that's a reasonable dichotomy from different points of view. Ayman from a critical perspective that tried to sort of deconstruct the dichotomy in the first place. Yusef from an interpretive perspective, a sort of philosophical hermeneutic of the Quran, which took a slightly different approach. But the question that Nigmeh is addressing is, now we have these population of students and teachers who perceive the dichotomy. And the one point I would add at least, and here I don't speak as a biologist, but we have a couple of really good biologists in the room. What the biologists have told us, and I'm going to take them at their word, that essentially evolution is settled science. I'm not going to call it fact, because in science, it's always possible that somebody's going to come up with some theory that'll refute the whole thing and turn it all on its side. Once Newton was settled science, now Einstein, so it could change. But for the time being, currently, it's not that the West invented this, although people did, in fact, do the work, and people did, in fact, do the investigation, but they did the investigation of data outside of people. It wasn't stuff only in their heads. They studied stuff outside of their heads. So there is these ideas that are settled science, and a number of Muslims, both historically and in Israel, see them as in tension with one another. And now my question to you is, how do we address that educationally? In other words, we can try and unpack it and say that it's not there, or that somehow we created the dichotomy. But I'm not at least convinced that we created this. My sense is it's out there in the data. And each of you offered what I thought were really interesting directions about how might we think about this educationally or pedagogically. And I'm sort of soliciting your help in helping us to think about that, given at least my understanding of that sort of tension between what appears to be settled science, at least according to the biologists, and religious tradition, in this case, Islam, as understood by a bunch of people, both Islamic experts and teachers and others and students. Long question.
Thank you so much, Hanan. Yusuf, Ayman, do you want an answer to that or comments from your perspective? Please, Ayman.
I think the data that Nigmeh showed us actually was reflected, not the dichotomy, reflected that there is also this, trend that, sees that, there is a compatibility, there is a possible linkage. There are teachers, policymakers who are trying to accommodate evolution theories within Islam. I think also this was evident in Nigmeh's data or Nigmeh's presentation. The idea here is, there is no news here. I mean, again, from the end of the 19th century, the very beginning of the 20th century, people are divided into these three camps. The camp that rejects, the camp that accepts, and the camps that tries to accommodate and modify. And now, the idea now is where is the interest? The interest, and to answer your question, Hanan, is in the hermeneutical moves. Now, the hermeneutical moves, these are not only in the head of the theorists and the people who are, writing tafsir or ta'wil. This is also the job of the teachers. The teachers at the classroom, they are doing hermeneutical moves. For example, they are deconstructing the idea of evolution into pieces. For example, the idea of selection, the idea of progress, the idea of a struggle, there are a lot of, I think Yusef, brilliantly, brought to us our attention the idea of thumma, and then, it's in Arabic, for example, it means, it's in order, but it in loosely time. So the time is loose, the time is not definite, the time could be, 1 year, 100 years, thousands of years. So you start making, and the interest, I think, for Nigmeh is to go for this hermeneutical moves at the classroom level, and there to try to theorize it, to characterize it, to classify it, because eventually, and this would be my last remark, eventually, for now, we are buzzing both religion and evolution as ideologies. And this is the problem. This is the trap. The trap that, you know, evolution is not an ideology, it's a theory. It's a theory in science. And also religion is not ideology. Sometimes we ideologize religion, you know, but religion, it's not an ideology. Religion is not a framework, a conceptual framework only. It is more a framework of relationships, of guidance, as Yusef suggested. So I think the interest here, to answer in one word, to go for the classroom, for the pedagogies, the way the teachers are working at their classroom, and to try to theorize it there. This would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayman. Yusuf, do you want to say something about this question? Please.
Complement what Ayman has said. I think what we have done is we are urging students in schools, learners in schools, to be open and reflective about what they know, the settled. But what we are also saying is they should also be open and reflective about what they do not yet know. So they have to be open to what can still come. And usually what happens in our schools is that we are closed when we assume that we have a particular understanding of a concept or a practice. So what we are saying is what Nigmeh reminds us of. When we interpret what is settled, but we are also open whether our interpretation is still plausible, but we remain open to what is still to come. And that is a challenge. And therefore, the focus should be more on the pedagogy rather than the content per se. Not entirely separated from the content, but the pedagogy, how you think, how you understand, and how you can yet come to know. If that guiding framework is not there, it will be difficult for anyone to move from what Ayman has described as the neutral camp to the more progressive camp, or even from the traditional or conservative camp to the more radical camp.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. Any other question in chat room? I have no question. One question. This is a fascinating presentation. Thank you. Please, could you circulate the PowerPoint to us? It means a presentation of Nigmeh so that we can think about it carefully, please. I don't know if they can or not. Okay, other question, please, or response from Nigmeh on the question, comments of Hanan? Khalid, do you have any question?
We have a
okay.
question from Michael.
Okay, thank you, Michael. How are you?
Yes.
Really good to see you. I'm doing well. Thanks ever so much. I first want to say, thank you ever so much to Nigmeh, because I found those data fascinating, particularly for me, the diversity of responses. And as a biologist and biology educator, and I admit this is as much as a comment as a question, I was thinking about Hanan, what he was saying, because of course for me, the word settled may be quite close to appropriate, but I wouldn't ever, when teaching biology in schools, even in quite secular British schools, talk about the theory of evolution being settled for a number of reasons. One, there are a number of people here who work in the nature of science. I'm quite happy to talk about its findings being quite robust, about it being accepted broadly within the scientific community. But I would want students to try and get this idea about the sort of way that science, as you intimated, develops and changes. And then going specifically to the issues in this project, just to say as a biology educator, I am quite comfortable with the idea that there are some schools where it may be counterproductive to try and introduce parts of the theory or ideology of evolution. And in those circumstances, I'd be much more inclined to concentrate on what's often described as microevolution, the sort of changes that occur within a species, and I would choose non-human species. There are lots of standard examples that the biologists among us know extremely well, because they can be used to help students understand the theory of natural selection and important ideas in biology, such as adaptation, and they're not controversial. And I would hope that as students come to understand those ideas, it may well be that in the future, they develop a richer understanding of evolution. But even if they don't, that's not the end of the known universe. Lots of people don't develop a full understanding of evolution, and there are broader aims to education, as some people were discussing at lunch. So thanks ever so much, Nigmeh. Really important work and of huge implications, not just in some schools in Israel, but in many, many other countries as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael, for your comments. And is any other question from audience or from chat room? I have no other question. Please, Tali.
So
how are you, Tali?
I don't have to come forward because you hear me from the microphone over there, but you see me also on Zoom. So I think that unlike Michael, I am a bit concerned as a biology educator. As a biology educator in this country. And I do want to see more Arab students in the building just across from our building, which is the biology, the building of the Faculty of Biology. And I believe that in order to become students of that faculty, in a way, I want to allow them to get to higher education with the same education, views, understanding of major scientific theories, including evolution. And yesterday, when we presented the different streams of the Israeli school system, we said that we are not going to talk about the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi stream, because they are not part of the national education system, and because basically they do not pursue higher education, mainly in the sciences and or particularly in biology. So I do not want to give up almost 20% of the Israeli society, saying that they can study, different biology, or do not require or demand the same understanding that I would require and demand from Jewish students. So I would like to hear Ayman and Yusef's opinion about that. And I didn't plan it together with Michael, but I think we have to disagree about this issue.
Thank you, Tali. Yusef, do you want to say something about this?
I think my response would be, I do not think that we can present education as absolutely the discourse of a particular community and exclude others. That would be undermining the very idea of education. So my argument would be, even with those who we vehemently disagree, even those who offer resistance to our thoughts, we should be willing and prepared to engage. So I'm arguing for a kind of engagement with the other, irrespective of who the other is.
Thank you. Ayman, do you want, please?
Just a quick response. honestly, this is not an obstacle for any Arab students to go and study biology or science anywhere. If there are obstacles, and there are, we should look at it, like in issues of budgets, discrimination, institutional, policies, but this is not the, the attitudes toward evolution is not an obstacle, it's not a major obstacle. It shouldn't be like so definitive, and so decisive. It's not an obstacle. And actually we know, now we know from research, for example, that people who were affiliated with the most radical fundamentalist, Islamist groups, in the West, and there were people who studied science. The most fundamentalist, attitudes to the study of Quran, and these were people who studied science. They instrumentalize science, and this is the problem now, that we are asking them to believe in evolution as an ideology. What they do, they instrumentalize it. They use it as it is. It's a theory that explains what, some parts of of our existence. We shouldn't, see it as something that is comprehensive, as all-encompassing, something that, should, it's not an ideology. Again, the same as religion is not an ideology. And every time that we push them, that not to instrumentalize their perception, their understanding of what evolution is, actually we are pushing them to a very specific notion of evolution as an ideology. But it is not really an obstacle, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ayman. Nigmeh, please. Nigmeh, I cannot hear you. I think
now you hear me?
It's much better.
Okay, Ayman,
better. It is, yes.
I think you.
I have a little question too. Perhaps you can give us really question. If I am thinking about the debate, evolution and Darwin, they are not inseparable. For example, in Turkey, debate about evolution is a part of this debate that Darwin was a Jew, Yahud. Do you know something from, it was really, you can see a lot Arabic publication of debate in Turkish language. Is any, was that also addressed in your interviews or didn't come up for debate? This really just one small question, perhaps. Thank you. Please.
To me or to?
Okay.
I didn't hear about it. But
that is a question for you. Do you know from your interviews?
From my interviews. No.
I know the answer of Ayman.
Okay. I didn't hear it. No.
Okay.
Not here in Israel.
Okay.
But I wanted to say to Ayman that we are not using the term believe. We don't ask, or we don't even expect pupils to believe in evolution. It's not in our agenda. It's not here. We are talking about understanding and accepting as a scientific theory. Thank you.
My question?
I maybe have a comment. I was scribbling a lot during Ayman's response. I really feel like it echoed a lot of thoughts that I've been having, and I really appreciated it, in addition to loving all the other comments here. But I could offer one thing that I've done when I've offered seminars on Jewish responses to evolution, which is controversial, and not everyone agrees with it, but I come with other voices, and there's someone who presents a Jewish anti-evolution view. and he presents it brilliantly. And it's not done in a paternalistic way, a condescending way. It's not saying this is the view that's not accepted. It's someone who brings that perspective into the classroom. And for me, even though it offers certain challenges, I think if I understood some of the spirit also of Yusef's comments, is it demands an extra openness from me. And the question of where do each of us have our red lines of where we're open to really listening and hearing each other, and where we think it's appropriate to draw those lines and not is certainly one of the questions that come up for me in these conversations. So thank you for highlighting a lot of interesting points for me.
Okay.
I would jump over here. I would respond to Tali, actually, and then we have to finish.
But Hanan, very shortly, we have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so just quick, I agree with Yusef on this issue, that and I also agree with Ayman's response that whether or not what a person thinks about the theory of evolution is not the primary criterion that's going to admit them to higher education. But I think that Yusef's comment was greater, which has to do with what's the purpose of teaching in schools. And although I do think higher education is a good thing, and I like to see kids move along and be admitted to institutions of higher learning, including the Technion, if that's where they would like to go. But I think our first job is to help kids grow and develop in the way in which they would like to grow and develop along the lines of openness that Yusef was describing. So that particular issue doesn't resonate quite so much with me. And as to settled science, I was just trying to come up with a word other than fact. So robust, I'll take robust. I think robust is just a great word.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to end our discussion here. To you, I thank you again for your contribution, comments, question of the participants. I wish you a nice evening. Here is in Indonesia, 7 p.m. Have a nice day in Israel, and thank you so much.